What if I told you there was a boxer who couldn't knock out a paper bag with a single punch, yet somehow managed to drop some of the hardest hitters in the sport? From his impossible shoulder roll defense to his laser-precise counterpunching, Pernell "Sweet Pea" Whitaker was undoubtedly one of the most technically brilliant fighters in boxing history, and his best performances are honestly some of the most beautiful displays of the sweet science you'll ever see.
God, it was so much fun. It was so exciting because every step was a step. You know, every competitor, and I don't care, everybody's lacing them up, has a chance to win. So, and your guy is Sweet Pea, and you prepare.
But how did a man who threw pillows for punches manage to knock out world champions? And why did he deliberately choose to fight in a way that made every bout look like a masterclass rather than a brawl? To find out, we need to go back to 1978. Norfolk, Virginia, a city that would produce more Olympic boxing medalists than any other in America. And in the heart of its projects, a skinny 14-year-old kid was about to walk into a gym that would change his life forever. The Norfolk Recreation Center, January 1978. Pernell Whitaker, standing barely 5 feet 6 inches and weighing maybe 110 pounds soaking wet, pushed open those heavy doors for the first time. But this wasn't just any gym. This was home to George Benton's protégés, a former middleweight contender who had developed a defensive system so complex, so mathematically precise, that most fighters couldn't understand it even after years of trying. Most teenagers would have walked out. After all, what's the point of boxing if you can't knock people out? But Sweet Pea wasn't most teenagers. You see, growing up in the Newtown projects of Norfolk, Pernell had already learned the most valuable lesson of his life. Survival wasn't about being the strongest, it was about being the smartest. So while other kids in the gym were practicing their power shots, throwing bombs at the heavy bag, Pernell was doing something different. He was spending hours, I mean literal hours, just slipping punches. Not throwing, just moving. Benton would have him stand in front of a swinging heavy bag, and Pernell would slip it by millimeters, over and over, until the motion became instinct. But it wasn't just the slipping. George Benton was teaching Pernell something that only a handful of fighters in history truly mastered: angles. See, most boxers think in straight lines. They stand in front of you, you stand in front of them, and whoever lands more or harder wins. But Pernell? He was learning to turn boxing into geometry. After just 2 years of this intense technical training in 1982, 18-year-old Pernell Whitaker stood on the verge of something special: the U.S. National Championships.
We are live in the sports arena, but it had to be a touching scene for all of you. A kid who had to fight his way out of the barrio and did it successfully. So we are coming to the battle for the...
And despite being one of the youngest fighters in his weight class, thanks to George Benton's teachings, Sweet Pea didn't just win, he dominated, barely getting touched the entire tournament. This victory earned him a spot on the 1984 U.S. Olympic boxing team. But could a fighter who chose precision over power really succeed on the world's biggest stage? July 28, 1984, the Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Pernell Whitaker entered the ring for his lightweight division matches, and what happened next shocked the boxing world.
He's been taken from Whitaker, and Whitaker still keeps his defensive poise about him and continues to slip punch. A simply marvelous exhibition by Pernell Whitaker as he goes for the gold.
Fight after fight, Sweet Pea put on a clinic, not by knocking people out, but by making world-class fighters look amateur. The gold medal match. Pernell faced Luis Ortiz of Puerto Rico, a heavy-handed fighter who had knocked out his previous 3 opponents. And for 3 rounds, Whitaker put on an absolute masterpiece. Ortiz would throw, Pernell would slip. Ortiz would reset, Pernell would already be at a new angle, landing 3 punches before disappearing again. When the final bell rang, even Ortiz was applauding. The decision? Unanimous. Pernell "Sweet Pea" Whitaker was an Olympic gold medalist, and he'd barely been hit the entire tournament. But as Pernell stood on that podium with his gold medal, a question lingered. Professional boxing was different. These were 12-round wars, not 3-round exhibitions. Could a pillow-fisted defensive wizard really survive against professional killers who threw leather for a living? November 15, 1984. Pernell Whitaker turned professional just months after his Olympic triumph, and his promoter had one concern. Kids got all the skills in the world, but people pay to see knockouts. Can he sell tickets? It was a valid concern. Boxing, unlike the Olympics, was a business. And Sweet Pea's first pro fight proved their fears. Sure, he won a unanimous decision, but the crowd was restless. They wanted blood. They wanted someone on the canvas. They wanted violence. After his fifth professional fight, another dominant decision victory, Pernell sat in his locker room and had a realization. George Benton came in and found him staring at his hands. Benton smiled. His student was finally understanding. See, what Pernell realized that night was something that would define his entire career: accumulated damage. While one punch from Sweet Pea wouldn't drop you, 800 punches over 12 rounds absolutely would. But not just any 800 punches, precise ones. Punches that landed on the temple, behind the ear, on the floating rib, on the liver. Shots that other fighters threw wild, hoping to land, Pernell threw with surgical accuracy, knowing they would.
He has to limit that movement by cutting off the ring, and rather than going for the knockout, both fighters want to work the body.
February 18, 1989. Pernell Whitaker challenged Greg Haugen for the IBF Lightweight Championship. This was Sweet Pea's first world title shot, and Haugen was exactly the kind of fighter that should have given Pernell problems, a volume puncher who threw from weird angles and never stopped coming forward. The first 3 rounds, Haugen pressed. He was making it ugly, making it rough, trying to turn it into a street fight.
You mentioned earlier about Haugen being more than just a tough guy.
Whitaker to run from him, that they will force Pernell Whitaker to fight him, and Greg says that plays into his hands.
You think Haugen learned something going to Providence?
Another good stinging stiff jab by Pernell Whitaker.
And then, in the 4th round, Pernell showed the world something new. Haugen threw a right hand. Pernell slipped it by half an inch, and while Haugen's arm was still extended, Sweet Pea was already underneath it, landing a left hook to the body that you could hear in the cheap seats.
And then there's the first showboating by Pernell Whitaker. Pernell says, when I showboat, it's the equivalent of a basketball player with a flashy dunk. I'm trying to intimidate the opposition.
Well, he's tried that behind the back punch before, and a scoring combination by Pernell Whitaker.
Haugen's face contorted. Not from a single devastating punch, but from the realization that this was going to happen 500 more times tonight. And it did. By the 8th round, Haugen wasn't walking back to his corner. He was limping. By the 10th, his face was swollen, not from one big shot, but from 300 precise jabs that landed on the exact same spot. When the final bell rang, Haugen's corner was just relieved it was over. Unanimous decision. Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker was now a world champion, and he hadn't needed a knockout punch to do it. But Pernell wasn't satisfied. Lightweight champion was great, but the real money, the real legacy, that was in the welterweight division. Problem was, welterweight was where the true punchers lived. Guys who walked around at 160 pounds, cutting down to 147. Fighters who could genuinely hurt you with one shot. March 6, 1993.
He shouldn't be pulling this, trying to be such an aggressor so early.
Body shot by McGirt.
The boxing world watched as Pernell Whitaker, now the unified lightweight and super lightweight champion, challenged Buddy McGirt for the WBC welterweight championship. McGirt was no joke, 29 wins, 2 losses, and legitimate one-punch knockout power. The opening bell rang, and McGirt came out aggressive, trying to use his size advantage to bully the smaller Whitaker. But then something happened that would become Pernell's signature, the Matador performance. McGirt threw a jab. Pernell's head wasn't there. McGirt threw a right hand. Pernell was already on the outside, landing 3 punches to McGirt's ribs. McGirt reset and tried a combination. Pernell caught every punch on his shoulders and elbows, his defensive positioning so perfect that McGirt might as well have been hitting a stone wall. By the 5th round, you could see the frustration on McGirt's face. He was throwing everything he had and landing nothing. Meanwhile, Sweet Pea was landing 60% of his punches. a ridiculous percentage in professional boxing. In the 9th round, the accumulation started to show. McGirt's legs weren't responding right. His hands were dropping. Not from one big punch, but from 90 rounds worth of precise trauma accumulated in 9. Whitaker, sensing blood in the water, increased his volume. The referee stopped the fight in the 12th round. Technical knockout. Pernell Whitaker, the man who couldn't knock out a paper bag, had just TKO'd a legitimate welterweight champion. "How did you do it?" a reporter asked after the fight. "You don't have knockout power." Pernell smiled. "I don't need knockout power. I got something better. I got precision, timing, and 12 rounds.
Yes, but I want to ask you what you think. How would you answer that question? I want to question you this time. What you think, Larry?
Two terrific fighters. You won the fight. He was fighting with about an arm and 3/4. Did you know
okay.
that?
I said I wanted no excuses.
You're right. Did you know and realize early on that he wasn't using his left hook?
No, I didn't really pay it any mind. Like I said, when I walked in this ring tonight, I didn't want any excuses. When I win, I wanted to win. Well, if he had won, then we would have never heard about the left shoulder. But it was fine. I was fine. I was just at my best.
Did he hit you?
Digo, voy a noquear y llega el día de peli y noqueo y así te va a pasar a ti.
Esa mañana tienen todos los puertorriqueños de decir que me van a noquear.
O Puerto Rican,
April 9, 1994, Las Vegas. The fight that would define Pernell Whitaker's legacy was about to begin, and honestly, nobody gave him much of a chance. His opponent, Julio Cesar Chavez, 90 wins, 0 losses. Let me repeat that, 90-0. Chavez wasn't just undefeated, he was considered unbeatable. A Mexican warrior who had knocked out 76 of his opponents, who had never even been knocked down, who fought like a pressure cooker, slowly destroying everything in his path. The betting odds? 3-1 in favor of Chavez. The narrative? Sweet Pea's technical wizardry was about to meet Mexican granite, and granite was going to win. Benton looked at his student and said something that would echo through boxing history. "Pernell, he can't break what he can't hit." Fight night. The Alamodome. 60,000 screaming fans, most of them waving Mexican flags, most of them expecting to see Sweet Pea get destroyed. The opening bell rang, and Julio Cesar Chavez came forward like he always did. Measured, patient, cutting off the ring like a chess master. But then something happened that nobody expected.
That's going to make Whitaker think a little bit, maybe speed up his pace a little bit, because you don't take... Whereas Chavez...
He himself could be frustrated with
from foreign countries. Oh, good action.
and body shots.
But that could bode well more for Chavez. Chavez looking to bore in.
Punching away now. Another good shot.
Round 2 in the books. Round 3.
Pernell didn't run. See, everyone assumed Sweet Pea would try to box and move, stay on the outside, survive 12 rounds on points. But Pernell had studied something in the tape that nobody else saw. Chavez, for all his greatness, threw his right hand from the same angle every single time. Same setup, same delivery, like clockwork.
Freaking work off.
Falling and mauling by Pernell Whitaker. Whitaker's hand and foot speed. Doing the job, and now the crowd booing lustily.
I don't totally understand.
But Chavez unloading. Got him in the midsection.
Taking the offensive. Nice right hand. Was that out of a football field or something?
It looked like
The crowd went silent. Round 2, the same thing. Chavez would press, Pernell would slip, counter, and be gone before Chavez could respond. But it wasn't just the slipping. It was where Pernell was landing. Every single punch hit the same spot, Chavez's right eye. By the 3rd round, you could see it swelling. By the 5th, it was nearly shut.
7-0. Whitaker oozing with confidence.
His hand speed is what happened in the Meldrick Taylor fight, which was that he went so far behind he needed a big finish, and that's what's happened.
Finish to pull this one out as we head for the bell.
At the tremendous job Whitaker is doing. A body shot, another shot to the face, and away he goes. A more punching, and away he goes. Meldrick Taylor.
later in the round, he's doing the same thing, and he's actually taking it to Chavez at certain points, pushing.
Say Buffalo Martin as we begin round 9. When was the last time you actually uttered those words, Ferdy?
Yeah.
Chavez could be in a losing cause.
little bit of wobble in Pee-wee's legs just now, but he's playing back.
He's trying to just get the motor started here and let loose with the...
and he's not fighting in intelligence.
Tag Whitaker with the right hand. Whitaker with a wild miss. Is this a turning point here in round 9?
He's got this round in his hands if he just starts to throw more punches like that.
Again, Whitaker
right hand, some terrific body shots, and Pee-wee slowed up a little bit, but hey.
Round 6. Something unprecedented happened. Julio Cesar Chavez, the undefeated warrior, the Mexican legend, started to look lost. He was throwing at air, missing by feet, not inches. His frustration was visible. He'd throw a combination, and Pernell would make him pay with 6 precise counters. And here's where Whitaker showed his true genius. He changed rhythms. Most fighters fall into patterns, but Sweet Pea, one round he'd box, next round he'd pressure. The round after that, he'd fight on the ropes, slipping everything, making Chavez work. Chavez couldn't figure him out because there was nothing to figure out. Pernell was changing the puzzle every 3 minutes. Round 9. The accumulation was becoming obvious. Chavez's face was swollen, his right eye completely shut, his body marked with red welts from hundreds of body shots. Still, he pressed forward. That's what legends do. But now, for the first time in his career, Chavez was taking punishment he couldn't answer. Round 12, the final round. Pernell Whitaker, knowing he was ahead on the cards, decided to make a statement. Instead of coasting, he increased his output. Jab, 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 each one snapping Chavez's head back. Hook to the body, right hand upstairs, step out, new angle, do it again. The final bell rang. Pernell raised his arms. The crowd, even the Mexican fans, stood and applauded. They had just witnessed something special, perfection. The judges' scorecards were read, a draw. Wait, what? The boxing world erupted. A draw? Pernell had outlanded Chavez 311 to 220. He'd made a legend look ordinary. Even Chavez's own trainer admitted, we lost that fight. But here's the thing. In that moment of controversy, Pernell Whitaker proved something more important than a victory. He proved that precision beats power, that angles beat strength, that the sweet science wasn't just about who could hit hardest, it was about who could hit smartest. Despite the draw on paper, every boxing expert, every analyst, every fan knew the truth. Sweet Pea had just given a masterclass against one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. But the Chavez fight raised a new question. If Pernell could dominate a legend without knockout power, what would happen if he actually dropped someone? The answer came on August 26, 1995. Pernell's opponent was Jake Rodriguez, an undefeated prospect with 27 wins and 22 knockouts. Rodriguez was younger, stronger, and had the kind of one-punch power Pernell never possessed. On paper, this was a dangerous fight. Round 1 started as expected. Pernell moving, slipping, making Rodriguez miss.
He can throw it more readily than from his normal left-handed stance. Rodriguez, a sturdy southpaw, in good shape, starts out trying to go to Whitaker's body. Virtually everybody Pernell has fought over the past few years has said, I'm going to wear him out to the body.
Getting ready to fight Leotis Martin from Philadelphia.
Right.
And his wife saying, oh, Sonny's been sparring with this guy for years. He used to whip him in training camp. Let me tell you, it didn't work out like that in a boxing match. You got to forget all about ever sparring with a guy when you fight him in the ring.
You ever fought one of your sparring partners, George?
I did, and it was altogether different.
Hard right hand by Whitaker. Rodriguez has slowed down after having come out firing, and this gives Whitaker a chance to begin his offensive pattern. Jab, jab, jab. And now Jake Rodriguez, who said he had to jab with the jabber to have a chance here.
Merchant's got to figure it.
You leaving it to Larry?
No doubt about it.
But then in round 2, something clicked. Rodriguez threw a lazy jab, and Pernell saw something. An opening, a split second where Rodriguez's right hand dropped half an inch too low. Sweet Pea stepped in, not with power, but with timing. He threw a left hook that landed right on the button, right behind Rodriguez's ear, right on that sweet spot where the brainstem meets the skull. Rodriguez's legs went stiff, and he collapsed face first onto the canvas. The crowd went insane. Pernell Whitaker, Mr. Decision, Mr. Technical, had just scored a brutal knockout.
Rodriguez's head. Again, Whitaker blocking most of those with his arms inside. Counter right hand inside for Whitaker. Goes to the body twice with his left hand. Pernell doing a lot of damage in this round.
I've noticed something in the last 2 rounds that suggests something to me, George. Every time, or on several occasions,
that was the result of an accumulation of body blows. He hit him with about 6.
This knockout awakened something in Sweet Pea. Not a lust for power, he'd never have that, but an understanding. If he could time his punches perfectly, if he could land on the perfect spots, he didn't need power. Precision was power. March 6, 1997. Pernell defended his welterweight title against Oscar De La Hoya, the golden boy of boxing, the next big thing. De La Hoya had everything: youth, speed, power, and a 27-0 record with 24 knockouts. The fight was close, razor close. De La Hoya used his size and youth to press the action, and for the first time in years, Pernell looked mortal. Not dominated, but tested. The judges gave it to De La Hoya by unanimous decision, and while many thought Pernell had done enough to win, the writing was on the wall. At 33 years old, Sweet Pea was entering the twilight of his career. But Pernell Whitaker wasn't done yet. He had one more statement to make. February 20th, 1999. 4 years after the Rodriguez knockout, 35-year-old Pernell Whitaker faced Andrei Pestriev for the WBA light middleweight championship. Pestriev was a 22-1 Russian fighter with legitimate power, and everyone, thought Pernell was too old, too small, and too shop-worn to compete at this level. The opening rounds were tentative. Pernell, now fighting 2 weight classes above where he won his Olympic gold, looked almost hesitant. Pestriev was bigger, stronger, and landing his jab with authority. But then, in the 6th round, something magical happened. The referee took one look at him and waved it off. TKO. Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, at 35 years old, fighting 2 weight classes above his natural weight, had just knocked out a champion. After the fight, Jim Lampley asked Pernell the question on everyone's mind. How? How do you still have the ability to finish fights without power? Pernell smiled that sweet smile and said, "Power's overrated, Jim. Timing and placement, that's eternal. I'm hitting you where it matters, when it matters. That's something age can't take away." April 27, 2001. Pernell Whitaker, now 37 years old, stepped into the ring for what would be his final professional fight. His opponent was Carlos Bojorquez, and the fight was for, well, it didn't really matter anymore. Pernell won by unanimous decision, bringing his record to 40 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw, and 17 knockouts. That knockout number surprised people. 17 knockouts for a guy who supposedly couldn't crack an egg. After the fight, George Benton, now in his 70s, embraced his student in the ring. "You did it, P. You did exactly what I said you'd do. You became impossible to hit, and you did it your way." Pernell Whitaker retired that night, leaving behind a legacy that confused casual fans, but mesmerized true students of boxing. He'd won world titles in 4 weight classes: lightweight, super lightweight, welterweight, and light middleweight. despite never having what anyone would call knockout power. But here's what made Sweet Pea truly special. He didn't just win without power, he thrived without it. He turned his biggest weakness into his greatest strength by understanding something fundamental about combat. It's not about how hard you hit, it's about where you hit and when you hit.
The greatest fighter in the world. Fair enough to call that?
I think they made that title for him. I don't think there's a greater fighter.
The truth is, Pernell Whitaker understood what most fighters never learn. Power is just one tool in a massive toolbox. Timing is a tool. Angles are tools. Precision is a tool. And when you master those tools to perfection, you don't need a sledgehammer. A scalpel works just fine. Watching Sweet Pea in his prime, especially during those king and welterweight years, it seemed physically impossible for him to throw a normal punch. But that wasn't showboating or disrespect. It was efficiency. By coming from unexpected angles, by timing his shots when opponents were off balance, by landing on spots that caused maximum damage with minimum force, Pernell was actually being more effective than if he'd tried to muscle his way to victory. Though he transformed his style over the years, becoming more patient, more tactical, Sweet Pea never lost that fundamental genius. Hit where it hurts, hit when they don't expect it, and do it 500 times a fight. By the way, let me know your thoughts on this question. Does Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker deserve a spot in the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters of all time? Regardless of your opinion, share it below. I'd love to read it. And speaking of underrated technical geniuses, did you know that the fighter who many considered Pernell's defensive equal was a guy who fought the absolute best of his era and never got the credit he deserved? Guillermo Rigondeaux came from Cuba with 2 Olympic gold medals, just like Sweet Pea, and his defensive mastery was so complete that fighters literally refused to get in the ring with him. To learn more about his incredible story, click the video on your screen right now. That's Boxing Without Limits.
Pernell Whitaker, Sweet Pea.